All right, guys, next up we have something completely different. Let's have a technical deep dive into Zabbix triggers. So we have a lot of complex trigger functions, different ways how we can define triggers. There are a lot of new settings nowadays. So let's recap. How can we master our triggers? I will welcome my fellow colleague from Zabbix, Aleksandrs Petrovs-Gavrilovs, trainer at Zabbix. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you here. So I'll try to fit everything that I possibly can in 20 minutes about trigger, which basically means I will just throw out information at you, and I hope you will remember something. So trigger mastery in Zabbix, some tips and deep insights. So first, of course, we need to talk about the main problem or problems that we encounter when we talk about the triggers whatsoever. And that's, of course, the huge amount of problems which the incorrect configuration can bring, right? When you open the monitoring problems page and you see that, well, you probably will have two kind of reactions, right? You either will, or again, your colleagues will be in panic, right? So you will just like, oh no, there's so many problems. What do I do? Who do I call, right? You call everyone, maybe in the middle of the night, everyone is up. And now they are also confused, trying to understand what's going on and how to solve it, and maybe even abstracting one another. Or you maybe seen this picture too many times, right? And you just look at it and you think like, oh, another day, another problem, I will just get a coffee and that's it. And this, of course, becomes a time bomb, right? Eventually, all those problems will affect you and affect your environment. So what can we do to make our life of our colleagues, especially first-level support, right, not senior engineers, simpler? Well, first of all, we need to understand that to reduce, right, the time to resolve the problems, or the MTTR as it is also called, we can do what? We can continuously improve the configuration of our triggers. And that, of course, will bring better efficiency in terms of how fast and how permanent the problem will be resolved. And that will allow us to maintain SLA, right? So our customers will be happy, we will be happy, maybe people we work with will be happy, right? They will sleep at night, and also we will get much more money from the customers. So the main cause of that issue, which you saw, this huge list of problems, is, of course, the common trigger configuration, right? There are a lot of fields available in the trigger configuration form, right? There's a huge amount. And most of them, for some reason, probably constant lack of time for every one of us, they are a bit ignored. Right, so I encourage you, of course, not to ignore those fields and start with the event name, which basically what everyone will see when they will look at the problems page. And here you can see quite frequent problem names on the slide behind me, right, which we see. So an example, load average is too high. And then you have a question, okay, how high is it? Like, what is too high? Or number of installed packages has changed. And then like, okay, was it something uninstalled or installed? Like, is it bad or not? Then, of course, SSL certificate is expiring. And then obviously, like when? Tomorrow, yesterday, how long this problem has been there? And so on. So you can guess how the other questions come to your mind. Right, so we can make them better by using the macros. There's a lot of macros in Zabbix which we can use. There's a huge list. Unfortunately, I don't have enough time to explain each and every single macro, but we do have trainings about that, so we are welcoming you to join them. Right, but there's a lot, and all of them can transform to useful real-time data. So, in example, the expression macro, which is not popular enough, I would say, because it may seem a bit complicated, but it's actually pretty simple. It's the same trigger, right, except you don't compare it to nothing. You just write a trigger without the threshold. And you will see the value, so you will see the aggregation. It may look at first a bit frightening because this number is something I cannot pronounce. But we can use other macro functions, right? We have extra macro functions which can make it pronounceable, right? And easier to understand, as you can see below. A short, easy to read number. So you just add a bit, and everyone can understand what is the CPU load, right? What is too high at the moment. Okay, let's say the problem is date related, right? Maybe you monitor the certificates and you don't want to see the problem, which is certificate is expiring, right? You want to understand when it is expiring. And then you have options, right? You can either make it just a precise date, which is good, but can be a bit slower to read, right? So you can transform it to words, not just show raw numbers, but actual words, and then anyone can read, okay, it expires on October 11th. Or, okay, right, maybe you want to signify what amount of time has left, right? And then you can specify in how many days it will expire, right, by using the functions related to the date formatting. Okay, let's say we monitor textual information, right? So let's say we monitor SNMP traps or log files, right? The frequent situation and always a bit of a problem to put it in the name without making it too hard to read. We can use the regsub macro, which will allow us to extract the value, something that matches a specific pattern, and make it readable. So instead of seeing something like that, right, so when we go to the monitoring problems page and we see this wall of text, which is impossible to understand, it was I who highlighted it in the red, right? It would be in the black and you probably wouldn't understand what's going on. But below we can see the clear issues of what was happening and what we should fix. Okay, let's talk about how to make a bit less noise, right? So we should always take a double look at our trigger expressions, right? We always need to try and understand what we are doing, what we are building. Do we need a quick solution to just constantly detect problems, or do we need to make it permanent? And the most common misstep is, of course, using the easiest functions, which is okay in some cases, but not in all of them, right? Because if you use something like last, change, no data without thinking twice, you will have flopping triggers, right? Which go to, okay, problem, okay, problem, okay, problem, and so on. And because of that, you can start trusting your Zabbix less, right? It can be just like in that fairy tale about the boy who cried wolves, as I usually tell to the students on the training, right? Until the wolves will actually come for you, right? And then everything will stop working. So we can evaluate the data, right? We can use the functions which actually aggregate the data. They are also simple, the average, the max, the find, the count, all of them, to actually make Zabbix count for us how bad and how long the situation is bad, and only then detect the problem. Okay, we have not only the problem expression, right? We don't have to be focused on what defines a problem, because this means that as soon as we define what is a problem, and the Zabbix sees the data which is not problematic, it will resolve it, right? Like we see here, okay, we monitor amount of space, and as soon as we have more than 20%, the problem is resolved. But if we have 20.01, it's not like really resolved, right? It's still there, it's just invisible for Zabbix. So we can then start using recovery expressions to specify what actually is a proper resolution, right? We can dictate ourselves what is a problem and what is not a problem. And that we will have constant, either lasting problems if we don't solve them, or problems we can trust, right? So we can see them in Zabbix and we'll think, yeah, that's a real problem, I can see that, I need to solve it, not just ignore it and go and drink the coffee. Okay, when you monitor log files or SNMP traps for that matter, a common misstep is just to, again, specify this problem detection. Okay, if we have an error of some kind, detect a problem, right? And this leads to a situation where you see a problem and then you don't know what is the problem. You're like, okay, there's a problem in the log file, but, you know, what is the problem? And you need to then go and check the data, see what were the problems, see that maybe there were actually many, but, well, because of incorrect trigger configuration, you didn't notice them. So sometimes, in some cases, we then think, okay, then I probably should create a trigger for every single possible error code that can happen. And then you get a configuration which is impossible to manage, right? Because depending on what you monitor and how many error codes are there, you may end up in a situation like this. This is, by the way, a real instance which has almost 3,000 hosts. But because of actually creating a trigger for every single possible error, they ended up with 2 million triggers, which is a bit hard to manage, right? You need to go and try to tune maybe 2 million triggers occasionally. So what can you do? You can actually create problems based on values, right? So you can then specify that you want the multiple problem event generation mode, right? And using the same reg sub, which we saw moments ago, to give the error code in the event name or details about the problem, you will actually see multiple problems with different reasons why they happen and what needs to be resolved. But okay, then of course you may end up with a lot of problems which can be resolved by just one single OK situation. So then you can use the trigger-based event correlation to make it even more precise. Right? I think that's a very, very powerful feature of Zabbix because it allows you to create one trigger, but for a lot of things. And that means you technically manage only one trigger while you detect problems for different error codes, different traps, and even maybe different hosts, depending on how much information can you get from one message. Right, and this is the configuration. By the way, we will work deeper with that configuration in the workshop. So if you really want to understand what's here, join us tomorrow. But essentially what we do here, we have the problem expression that detects a problem when we get a message with text raise. And it resolves when we get the text message clear. And then in the tags, we have what might seem like a complex regular expression, which extracts what actually happens and with what, which is actually pretty simple. Right? And then instead of resolving everything with one clear event, in that case, problems will be resolved only when the tags match. So in the tags, you can see there is the device name, which has the problem. And you can see different ones, right? You can see problem for one device, problem for a different device, and one of them are resolved, right? And you can see the tags are matching because of the values. Zabbix will check what was affected by the problem and for what you got the clear message for which device and resolve only those, right? So it will be a lot faster and a lot simpler for you to manage, and most of the time, probably things will even resolve by themselves. But that's not all what Zabbix can actually do. There's a lot of advanced functions like trend functions, which allow you to work with huge amounts of data without using a huge amount of resources, right? So the trend functions allow you to take a look quite back in the future for days, months, years, maybe more, depending on how far do you want to go, and use that data to compare it to what you have now. So then you can easier find that baseline example to understand, okay, my environment is behaving like this for most of the time, but now it is behaving completely different, right? And not only you will save resources, you will make a proper data analysis to understand, is it bad or is it not? Right, and to detect anomalies, you can use a function such as this. This is also based on the real-life trigger where the amount of light is monitored in the optical cables. Right, and obviously in optical cables, the amount of light should be, well, the same most of the time if everything is fine. But, you know, sometimes something can happen. Someone may try to take the cables home. Someone may make some construction works at the place where the cables are with heavy machinery, right? And the amount of light changes just a tiny bit. And with just a threshold, you might not notice this, or in this case, Zabbix might not notice this. But with this function, you can actually, again, compare the data across, an example, the last 6 months, and then use seasons to aggregate it by day. So what should it be? Then even if a tiny speck of light is lost, Zabbix will let you know. And this is something I see used suspiciously low amount of time. I don't really know why, but in the trigger configuration, you have the menu entry name and URL field. Right, and without them, when a problem happens, if you have a new person on the job, right, and they see the problem, they might not know how to solve it. So, right, they will need to call someone or Google it or waste time trying to make the situation better, and then also get the approval to say like, okay, I found this solution, can I use it? It maybe will work, maybe not, who knows? And all of this takes time. All right, but if you will just add this URL to the Confluence, to the documentation, to the solution you already know exists, you will save a lot of time to everyone, right? To the customer who will be affected by the problem, to the engineer who will try to solve the problem, and maybe to yourself, so they will not need to ask you because they will have the answer right in Zabbix by just making a click to the link. And there are some extra hints, right? So if you think that the function you're trying to build is too complicated, right? If you think that when someone will look at this trigger, they will probably be puzzled for the rest of the day or week, use the calculated items. Just create a calculated item and see the result of the calculated item. And then use the key, or in simpler words, use the calculated item in the trigger. It will be a lot simpler to create, plus you can visualize what Zabbix is thinking. It will be a lot simpler for everyone. Our templates are definitely great, but they are built in an average environment in mind, right? We cannot just build a template with the threshold for every single environment that exists. That is physically not possible. So that means when you link the template to your database server, your network device, switch, router, firewall, whatever that is, adjust the thresholds. It's a very frequent situation when someone just links the template and then they get a list of problems which they ignore because for them that's not a problem. All you need to do is go to the macro configuration and change the thresholds. They have the descriptions, you will have a lot less problems and you will sleep a lot calmer. Right, and of course, make sure to use functions with reasonable amount of values. Don't try to make Zabbix analyze years of data based on history, right? Use the trend functions, we mentioned them just a moment ago, because otherwise Zabbix will use more resources, right? Zabbix will use more CPU, maybe more memory, maybe both, depending on what and how you evaluate. And if Zabbix uses too much memory and you gave it not enough memory, so you configured not enough value cache, well, your Zabbix may just spiral downwards from that, right? It will use all the memory you allowed it to use. So now it needs to go to the database to get the values to evaluate is there a problem or not. And that means it starts making a lot of queries. And maybe you have a lot of triggers. So it makes even more queries. And then, well, database performance slows down, Zabbix slows down, everything slows down, and maybe even crashes. Right, and we don't want that, so make sure to tune the value caches, but also to use proper trigger functions. And of course, follow the matrix here, right? Think about what you are building, double check what it reflects. Think, is the threshold okay? Is it a proper threshold? Check the history of the values before actually making something a threshold. Right? And don't just make a single threshold, maybe an aggregated threshold. Then take a look how the problems are detected. Don't ignore them just like, okay, the problems are detected, trigger works, probably will work fine. No, take a look, pay attention to it, and see does it behave fine over time, not just in the last 5 minutes. And if it doesn't, then maybe introduce a recovery expression to make it more precise. And then you can go even further, add some tags, use some macros, and add some documentation on how to resolve a problem and add it as a link. And that's about it, but before I will say goodbyes, there's also a workshop tomorrow, right, about the triggers where all that you see, well, 90% about, we will do actually in practical form, right? So we'll build some triggers, some correlation, as much as we can in 1 hour. And now I can say thank you.
Thank you. We do have a question. Can the usage of reg sub functions impact Zabbix performance? So if we use a lot of them?
That really depends on from where you are reg subbing the data, right? So if you actually have huge chunks of text from which you're reg subbing, it can affect potentially the CPU usage rather than Zabbix performance, but it can affect both at the same time because of the CPU. Yes.
Have you, in your experience, seen it affect performance?
Just once,
Okay.
just a single time, but because of that, that means it's possible. But it was, to be honest, also around 2 millions of triggers, and all those millions of triggers used exclusively regular expressions, which is not something that's supposed to happen.
All right, got it. Thank you.